Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, still plugging away at making Christmas cards to add to my stash for next year. And I was going through my stamp sets. I was looking for a specific stamp set for a different project, and I came across the Winter Flower stamp set that I've done a couple videos on, and I'll have links to those videos at the end of this one if you've missed them. This is the third time, I think, that I have done a video for this, and yeah, it jumped right out at me. Y'all know, big floral images, I'm game, love, and I'm still in the Christmas mood, so I was like, this is perfect, I want to use it, I wanted to color. So I took some Canson XL watercolor paper, have it in my MISTI. I was using one of the MISTI sticky grid mats to hold the watercolor paper in place to stamp this image. And I used my anti-static powder tool, and I applied the anti-static powder before putting the watercolor paper onto the sticky grid, just because I don't want to get all of the anti-static powder all over that sticky grid. That just nope. So stamped it with clear embossing ink, coated it with Simon's Gold embossing powder, did the process a second time because, again, why not, you know, when I've got everything out. So exact same process, anti-static powder, put the watercolor paper into my MISTI, stamped it with clear embossing ink, and then coated it with the gold embossing powder. Once I've got all the embossing powder on this, tap off the excess, and then I'll melt this with my heat tool. And as always, tilting it back and forth in the light to make sure that everything is smooth and melted and I didn't miss any areas. You can always tell because they'll be like, when you're tilting it in the light, you'll see everything's raised and shiny, but if you see any dull, grainy looking areas, those are just spots that you haven't hit with the heat tool to melt. So you definitely want to do that before you start coloring, because lesson learned, you know, when you're coloring or watercoloring or ink blending, etc., and all of a sudden part of your image disappears and it's like, oh yes. So anyway, melted these with my heat tool, and then I am going to use Distress inks to watercolor, because again, I was in a coloring mood, wanted to watercolor, and Distress inks are, you know, generally my go-to, just because, you know, there's so many colors to choose from. I like watercoloring with them. You can, I put the cover back on the sticky grid. Someone had asked me about that, and I always put the little plastic cover back on it, only because me and my clumsiness, it's a given. Like, I'm going to knock over a container of embossing powder or anti-static powder or just something. It's just better to be safe than sorry. So put that all aside. I got my Distress inks. I'm starting with Lumberjack Plaid, regular Distress ink, and I wanted to make it shimmery, so I'm using some Honeybee Bee Shimmery Liquid Shimmer watercolor. You don't need much of this. You need to shake it up really well. I just added a couple drops. There are other products that are like pretty much the same as this. There's a Lawn Fawn one, and I think I have the Lawn Fawn one, but I don't know where it is. And there is an Ink on 3 Pixie Dust, liquid Pixie Dust. I've done several videos using that. That was years ago, so I couldn't even point in that direction, but very similar. I'll have links to all of them. They all work pretty much the same from what I've noticed, and they're just pretty. Just a nice way to add some pretty sparkle, which I will show at the end. It doesn't show up on camera, but I'll show at the end. So I just smushed my ink pad onto my glass work surface, added the shimmery watercolor, swirled it up with a wet brush, and then I'm using a second brush that I keep as my clean brush. That's what I apply the water with to the background first, and then I just come in with the ink and the mix of shimmer and just start painting. So I super sped this up in editing, just because, also because honestly, like, I'm tired, I have a headache, and it's like, I don't want to sit here for ever discussing it, because I didn't do anything fancy. It literally is just picking up the color, applying it, and then you just sort of pull it out. And again, practice. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And this is me speaking from experience, because I still vividly recall when I started dabbling in watercoloring my stamped images way back in the day, and how overwhelmed I felt, and things weren't working, and I would watch videos and it's like, how do they do that? And it was just practice. The more I did it, you know, you start just figuring things out and you start getting more comfortable with it. And, you know, you start getting a little braver with it because, you know, the whole like messy watercolor that I love to do and make a huge mess with. But I love it. That was also very intimidating. But yeah, you just start small and you just keep working at it. And it does. You start figuring out, just like everything. Practice makes perfect. Although perfection's overrated, but you start getting better at it. And I still have a million things to learn, and I still love watching videos of other makers doing watercoloring and, well, everything, all card making. I love it. It's just fascinating to see other people's thought process and their creative everything. So anywho, back to mine. I used Rustic Wilderness and Twisted Citron for the big leaves, again with the shimmer. And then for these littler leaves, I used chipped sapphire and mowed lawn and a bit of shimmer and mix that together. So I've got just a nice kind of bluey green, but I went with the chipped sapphire because it's a little bit deeper. I didn't want the blue green to be like aqua, if you know what I mean. I wanted it a little more muted. So I did that, and then for the centers, it was a bit of wild honey and a tiny bit of ground espresso. No shimmer. There was no point. The centers are very, very tiny. It just didn't matter. And then for the little like berry type images, I used seedless preserves and a bit of the ground espresso for the little like kind of branch areas. And I actually added the ground espresso to the berries as well, because why not? It just added a little extra something. And as I'm like doing this voiceover, I'm looking like the way the light is hitting it's so sparkly. It's so sparkly. I love it. I always tell you guys, it's pretty much a given with me. It's like I'll post a video with like no splatter, no bling, or little amounts of bling, that sort of a thing. And then it's like I just need to get it out of my system. So the next one, aka this video, it's like I am putting on the shimmer and then I'm going to splatter, which is exactly what I did. So when I was done watercoloring, let everything dry, and then I pulled up my Gonzai Tombow Starry Colors, and I had already put the water in a couple of the colors that I wanted to use. So I'm using this like white gold color first, and really working this in with my fan brush, because any sort of metallic type watercolor like this, you need to either just let the water sit and soak for a good amount of time, or just really work it with your brush. It takes a bit to mix it up and get it going. So I didn't use my splat box because there's a bunch of stuff sitting in it right now. So I just splattered on my work surface because I'm just going to wipe it off when I'm done anyway. So I did the white gold sort of splatter, and then of course gold splatter, and I splattered just the heck out of it. I just needed to. It needed to happen. So did a ton of splatter. As soon as I was done the splattering, I cleaned my little fan brush, wiped off my work surface. You know, got that all cleaned up. I'm sure I got splatter on my sweater too. It's like, honestly, I live in these hoodies because, again, I work in my garage. It's cold here in Saskatchewan this time of year. I think we hit minus 45, something like that. I think it was around minus 45 with the wind chill. So I've got my garage heater cranked. I got a space heater right next to me that I'm not turning off even for the voiceover because it's cold. And my big old hoodies that you guys see the sleeves of in like every video, because I have multiples of them. And they're literally like, I got paint splatters and shimmer splatters and all kinds of stuff like stained into them. I don't care. Anyway, back to the card. I took sentiments from the same stamp set, lined up the two sentiments, and I'm stamping them onto this plum cardstock. Again, anti-static powder tool, stamped them with clear embossing ink, coated them with the gold embossing powder. There are not coordinating wafer dies for the sentiments. There is a coordinating wafer die for the main floral image. But it wouldn't have mattered anyway because I was putting two different sentiments together for this. So after I had heat embossed them with the gold embossing powder, I wiped off the anti-static powder just with my little microfiber cloth. And then I just fussy cut these. This was simple. I don't mind fussy cutting within reason. And I'll do it when I don't have a coordinating wafer die. Honestly, for me, the only difficulty fussy cutting is when I try to do it on camera. It's just so much easier for me to just sit back and just trim with the scissors and not really think too much. But when I'm trying to like stay in camera view for you guys, that's when it's difficult. So anywho, I fussy cut out the sentiments, set them aside. My card bases are going to be top folding A2 white note cards. And I am lining those up in my MISTI with the big winter flower image. Once I've got that lined up, I'm going to ink this up with Simon's Golden Locks ink. I've shown this in a bunch of videos. I really like using this one because it really is kind of a gold color without being an actual gold metallic ink. I love gold metallic ink, but I don't like working with it very often just because, yeah, you generally have to heat set it. I am clumsy and smear it. Even with heat setting, I'm just... And I don't really like gold metallic on the inside of cards, or especially not a big image like this. I would do it for little accent images, but gold metallic ink on the inside of cards, it's hard to write over with a pen, just FYI. So this is why I like the Golden Locks ink. I get kind of the gold color without the hassle of dealing with a metallic ink. So I stamped that on the inside, and then I lined up a couple more sentiments, and these I'm inking up with Seedless Preserves Oxide ink because I wanted the more opaque look for the sentiments. So I stamped those, set those aside to let them dry for a little bit because oxide inks do take a little bit longer to dry. And I can't remember if I mentioned this in the beginning or not, but you can use oxide inks to do this watercoloring because I always get asked that. It'll just be a different look because of the pigment properties and all the different things. It will just look different, but it totally works. I've done so many videos, you know, watercoloring with oxide inks. And again, it just depends on my mood, whether I reach for the regular distress inks, oxide inks, watercolors, markers, the 5 million different things I have to color because I like them all. Anyway, after I was done, all of the things, I trimmed down these backgrounds to be a full A2 card front, which lately for me is kind of a big deal because I've been trimming down everything to 3 3/4 by 5 inches before adhering it to my card. This time I did it. I was like, nope, I don't want to lose any of this. Is like a big image just to give you it because yeah, this is an A2 size card. That's how big this floral stamp is. That's why I love it. So you can totally do 5 by 7 cards with this. And honestly, that's probably what I should have done because then I could have matted it nicely like I like, but hindsight. Anyway, I adhered those to the card bases with craft tacky glue, stuck them under my MISTI for a couple minutes just to let them be held flat, you know, while it dries. And then I put little thin foam squares on the back of the sentiments that I had fussy cut and popped those into place on the cards. And then I went through my stash of bling, and of course I had bling that matched. I remember mentioning this when I showed these. These are the Fresh Fig embellishment mix from Trinity Stamps. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned when I first got these, I was like, ooh, these like will go so perfectly with Seedless Preserves. And they do. So yay, just a nice little win. So I just adhered a few of those to the card with the craft tacky glue. Once those are adhered into place, these cards are complete. And I'm going to turn the flashlight on so you guys can get an idea of the sparkle. Love. They're sparkly, and then you've got like the metallic heat embossing, the splatter, just a little bit of bling, nothing too crazy. And they're just fun. It was nice to color. I've been doing a lot of die cutting lately, so it was kind of nice to get back into the coloring and the splatter and all that fun stuff. So, as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will also have a supply list, and I'll link to all the supplies I use. That will be directly below the video as well. And then at the end, I will link to the other videos I've done using this same stamp set, as well as a link to my current holiday 2022 playlist, because this is I think this is number 30. I've done a lot this year. I'm doing good. There might be more. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Thumbs up, comment, subscribe if you haven't. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.